My mother's name was Barbara, and my father's name was Thomas. You know, me in particular, I was one of these depression babies. I born in 28, and my bringing up was all during the Depression. But I don't remember any hardships per se. I mean, everybody was in the same boat. Whatever happened to me happened to so many people. To me, it was all normal. But my first remembrance of Georgetown is that what I remember of the hardships that the older group of Lebanese, now I was born in 28, but my brother John was born in 1916. And there were a few older than John. I think John Ashley was born earlier. And those first generation older Lebanese children had it rough. And it gradually got better. We weren't as accepted into our local society, especially we had 2 strikes against us. As you know, the South is, especially back then, was basically the Bible Belt, as the expression goes. So the Catholics weren't understood, and I think that made it twice as difficult being raised in Catholic in a small town. They didn't know who we were in this respect. A lot of my friends thought we were Dagos. Now,
which is an expression for Italian.
For
right?
Italian.
Right.
And then they had no earthly idea where Lebanon was. They were from, the southern part of Lebanon, next to Israel.
Okay.
We were the borders between us and Israel probably is less than 20 miles. So it was very close. So, and they raised in a small village. My parents were in a very small village. And I think that the fact that there was no identity with us being Catholic, quite naturally we had to prove ourselves a lot more than the average person. Because I don't remember those things as being hardship at my young age back then, but I've heard stories that one that comes to my mind, the older Lebanese, Dr. John Ashley, saying that he would dance with a girl and the father would come on the dance floor and take her away from him. It was just, that's the kind of stuff that was hard to put up with. And I remember, and I think your wife, Mary Louise, will remember this, we didn't want our parents to talk to us in Lebanese language. Now, the bigger cities like Charleston, they were large enough that they could converse among themselves in the Lebanese language. But in Georgetown, I never heard my father speak to my mother in Lebanese because we didn't want to hear it. The beautiful part of the Lebanese migration, and I'm sure you could trace this back, only the adventurous and the people who wanted life to be better for them came to America. The immigrants who came to America, actually, they were the cream of the crop. They weren't the richy rich, now don't misunderstand me, but they were the one that wanted life to be better. There was 4 boys in my father's family. It just so happened that my father had sisters too, but you know, we never knew about them. I think it's the concept of our culture that the women were not they were proud of. They raised us and all that, but they wasn't accepted on the same level as the men were. And I never heard my father mention any of his sisters. What precipitated me going to Lebanon with my brothers, David and my brother John and our wives, was the fact that my brother Nimmer had just died, and we realized that, well, my mother, Nimmer died in 73, and my mother died in 65, and we brought our mother's sister, my mother's sister, who was raised in this country, graduated from Georgetown High School, back then it was called Wynyard High School, and was sent back to marry a cousin in Lebanon. Wow. And when we found out she was still living, we brought her over so she could be reunited with my mother before my mother died. And that started the as far as our family is concerned, of anyone going back to Lebanon to see if there was any more family there.
Right.
Well, but this is not my childhood, but
yes,
this is how I got acquainted with Lebanon, because when my aunt, my mother's sister, came back, who was raised in this country, when they graduated from Wynyard High School, when she came back, many of her classmates remembered her. But then my brother Nimmer died about 7, 8 years later, so we were twice as anxious to see who they were. Once we met one, was my father had any sisters and my mother brothers, so we wanted to see the family that was left behind. And I remember when we landed in Beirut, it was only about 6 or 7 that met us at the airplane, because only those who knew of us was there. But when we left, I bet you there was 40.
40 people came to the airport to see you off. Isn't that wonderful?
That was a wonderful experience to find a family.
Sure.
And it was like a new discovery.
Oh, I bet.
I had my wife Margaret with me, and we went over to another place where in southern Lebanon. We were from Lebanon, but she was from Zahle, and that is upclass area in the mountain resort area, kind of like Asheville. Well, as I understand it, like I say, I'm proud of the fact that they had to get up and go to come to this country. And it was basically over religious freedom, number one. And then number two would be economic opportunities. I'm not sure why Georgetown, they were attracted to Georgetown, but I've read books on Georgetown, and there was a boom in Georgetown. I mean, a scarcity of labor. We had the Civil War and all the young men, and they tell me that they actually advertise over in that part of the world for workers. Of course, back then, transportation by water. So, right at the turn of the century, we had intercoastal waterways that came through Georgetown. So it was the source of communication. And then Georgetown was booming with the lumber industry. Labor and opportunity, they must have done pretty well, because from what I read of Georgetown under the Morgan administration, our first mayor,
right,
the opportunity was there because they all did well. My grandfather, my mother's father,
right,
and mother, they came over first.
Oh, okay.
They came over around 1880 1885, maybe 1890. And then when my Uncle Nick, he was Arthur Joseph's father, he came over in the mid-1880s.
Right.
And when he came over, business was good. He went back to marry my mother. And I understand they were all very young back then. I understand, maybe not this young, but that's what I heard. She was 14 or 15 years old, very young. So my father went back and married my mother in Lebanon. And when we went there, we went to the church where they got married, and we noticed that it was kind of like a railing area with the women upstairs and the man downstairs. So the women didn't actually sit with the man. And what I found over there, which was so unbelievable, that basically when we went in '75, Lebanon was about 75% Christian. And so we went into a culture which I was so proud of Lebanon when I went there. To see it is to believe it. They were geographically located in an Arab world. They were Western culture, and they were Western religion. We were all Catholics. 75% of Lebanon when I was there was all Catholic. Yep. And when we were there, and we went to Damascus, it looked like God had painted a picture, and when he got to Damascus, it would look like it was at least 100 years back in time. You know, the extreme southern part of Lebanon was part of the Holy Land. So their religion was a lot more intense. I mean, like we would go into the country and we would see it would look like a mailbox. It was a little place that you could say a prayer. Well, that I didn't grow up with that knowledge, and I didn't know who we were. Like I say, we were just the unknown, and I can just say that it didn't bother me, but I know the prejudice that I felt. I know it was a dry goods store, and they sold a lot of, you know, ready to wear. So they did very well, and but when the Depression hit, I understand that the sale for dry goods and shoes dried up. And so we swapped into groceries. Everybody had to buy groceries. The boats that used to come in behind the store, and when they came in behind the store, this is on Saturday, the plantation, there were probably a couple of hundred blacks on these big barges, and they came in, bought the groceries, put their stuff back on the barges, right, and went back to the plantation. At that time, we had, you know, Georgetown being, 4 or 5 rivers that come into the Windsor Bay. You had to cross those rivers in ferry boats. There was no highway and no bridges. So it was not unusual that they would be transported that way. We all grew up as brothers.
Sure.
You couldn't tell any different, but there was, as who went into business together, Nick Joseph and Thomas Joseph were in business together. And then the other two, they were the youngest one. John Joseph was the spoiled one in the family. For us, he was the most fun to be around. Yeah, he had a great sense of humor. Thomas Cafe, that was owned by my brother Nick, and Thomas. We owned that. And when Nick Joseph died in 1920, to get you some orientation.
Very
so
early.
my father raised his 3 boys and 4 children. I literally was probably 11 or 12 years old that I didn't realize they weren't my brothers and sisters. The Nick Joseph family and my father were in business, and I wouldn't say a lot closer. All the Lebanese were very close. They owned that store, this Thomas's Cafe, and when they had to separate at some point, my father was a father for both families. And at some time, I think it must be around 1929 or 30, he moved from the house he had on Prince Street, and when he moved, he gave it to his sister-in-law, gave it to Nick's, and he gave that store, Thomas's Cafe, gave it to Annie and Essie. I remember living on Prince Street, but if I didn't hear it from other people what we did, I wouldn't recall the circumstances. My sister Helen remembered very well. I remember basically living over the store.
Right.
Whether I was actually born there or not, I'm not sure. Let me tell you this about the Catholic Church. To show you, now the Catholic Church in Georgetown, 1902, I think,
Right.
somewhere in that neighborhood, there was actually a cross in the church about maybe halfway up, and the Lebanese had to sit in the back behind the cross. We couldn't go up front, and it wasn't active in the sense, it's just the way it was. The first one that I remember that sat in front of the cross was the Isaacs. I.E. Isaac and T.E. Isaac, they began to sit in front of the cross. It was always on the left-hand side behind the cross, and that's where the cross was. Now, did that bother me? Not at all.
Right.
In fact, I had no idea what that was all about. I just thought that's where they put the cross. Everybody's got a place to sit. The biggest part of growing up that I remember, the fondest memory, was Easter. Over there in Lebanon, I was told this, so I don't know it, but Easter was celebrated more festivities and food to eat and special, more than Christmas. Christmas was not the momentum of celebration that Easter was. Easter, we used to walk from house to house, and it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 35 of us, or 40. We started after 9 o'clock Mass, and we started visiting, and we stopped about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the children couldn't come out anymore. Only the adults could visit in the evening. All the Easter goodies and you know, we call it baklawi and sambusik and Ross, all of those wonderful Easter, and that's the only time we got them. I mean, and we also were dressed up on Easter. My father died in 1940, and at that time the only one that was able to go to college was Brother John.
Right.
He started, I think, in 34. And when my father died in 40, he was in the progress of finishing his education. And my father did not want to take him out. I to this day wonder how Brother John got to go to college during the Depression.
And went to medical school, became a dentist, right?
A dentist, yes, became a dentist. After World War II, in 1946, my brother Nimmer took over. Well, he took over. My father died in 1940, and all of the money that he saved working in that store, literally he spent it on education. He sent me to college and dental school, just starting with me. He sent my sister Pauline to college. I finished dentistry, so that's an 8-year program. My sister Zion went to nursing school, and then my sister Helen was like the second mother. She was the oldest girl, so Helen helped Nimmer in the store. So Helen didn't get married till later. She got married in 48. But in the early days, I remember my mother telling my sister Helen many times, "Who's the mother, me or you?" When it was time to, we were fortunate, but when it's time to go to college for David and I, and we went together, and another cousin in Charleston now, he was Kiram Joseph. We had a priest named, I think it was Father Smelly. We had no idea what Georgetown University was about. Father Smelly said, "Nimmer, I want these two boys to go to Georgetown University." As you know, it's the alma mater of Catholic education in this country. It was the first school in America, even before Harvard or Yale, that got the Constitution of 1789 designated Georgetown and whatever they have to do to designate that as a university. So he got Nimmer to go up there. And so we went, and he insisted that we go to Georgetown. So he must have made the arrangement. That part I don't know. But I do remember quite well when we were talking to the dean. And quite naturally, 1946, I think 60% of my class were veterans of World War II, and they had precedent. I remember Nimmer telling the dean, in South Carolina, 1/2 of 1% in South Carolina were Catholics. And he says, "You know, we're a missionary state. If you don't take us, why does the church want to be Catholic? We have no Catholic. We don't have the priests. The priests are all missionary priests. What we need is educated Catholic laity." The dean said when Nimmer told him that, he says, "Okay, I'll take these two. Is there any other?" He said, "Yeah, we have another one, Kiram Joseph." He said, "Well, he's accepted too." They came home. I don't ever remember talking to any one of them about coming to Camden. It looks like it was the natural thing to do. We got 7 of the homes right in this area, and I can't believe that they came back here. Well, I say here we've got 3 in my practice, and my daughter Margie married a dentist, and he's here too. Timmy's down, and then we had Arthur, and then Kiram's brother, he's a dentist. I think we got about a dozen. David and I, when we got more affluent there, you want that second house, the lake house and all of that. He said, "Paul, let's don't have anybody except you and I, and we'll build it big enough that we'll never have to build it another one again. Well, at that time, there was only about 6 or 7 grandchildren,
Yeah.
and now we got about 40 or 50. When we have a get-together, I think the house has 10 bedrooms and,
Wow.
10 baths and 16 bedrooms. That generation of first generation, and we were raised almost as if it was one big family in Georgetown.
Right.
I say this: there's a strong love there, beyond just a cousin or a relative. I can feel it when I see them.
Right.
I don't necessarily try to feel that way. That's just the way it is. That was just the way we grew up. Let's see, David was born in 1925, so he was 3 years older than I was, 28. So he went into the service about 42 or 43, and he was in the Navy, and he became a coalman. And being a coalman, he was assigned to the Marines. Now, David may have in the earlier days during his recruitment, wore the Navy uniform, but he was a Marine through and through.
Right.
He didn't want anybody to say he wasn't a Marine. He was a Marine. He was in the invasion of Iwo Jima. We get a letter from home, from where he was,
Right.
and it was all scratched up. You didn't know what he was saying, the way he was.
Right.
At the time he was on Iwo Jima, I'm glad my mother didn't know he was there. You know, we found out once the invasion was there, and that wasn't a secret. Yeah, he was there. He was with the 3rd Marine Division, and he stayed on the beaches of Iwo Jima and bombed out holes that America had bombed Iwo Jima so much. It was just big cannon craters.
Yeah.
Yes, and he stayed in one of them 2 weeks. Didn't change his clothes, and he never told me this. I've noticed I was with him a lot, in dental school and my whole life, but he never talked about it. But I found out, I found out indirectly that there was 2 craters, and that was close by, and he, my mother's prayer, he figured out that the way they were shelling, that the crater he was in was going to be hit next. So he asked all the people in that crater to let's move over here, and only him and a few fellas got out of it, and it did hit, and he lost about 60% of his platoon, but he never talked about it. I always say I was at Paris Island assigned to the Marines, but he would not let me say I was a Marine. I was in the Marine, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
I was there for 2 years at Paris Island doing dentistry on my fellow Marine. When I came home, I said, "Oh no, you're not a Marine." To wedding.
Right.
Wonderful wedding, beautiful. The best wedding I've ever been to.
Wow.
It was just on the Mediterranean. It's one of those great resort areas.
Yes.
It was nice. So I got to get the feel of the Lebanese people.
Right.
And I would say this, just like I know I love the Irish, but just like you love the Irish background,
Yeah.
I became infatuated with the Lebanese Christianity background,
Right.
the Western civilization.
Sure.
Yes, the last time I went back, I learned a lot of what made me proud to be Lebanese. I was very close to Margaret's family. when we went there, there was a trunk, Margaret, when you found all those letters.
Yes.
That she had written when
had saved all the letters I wrote for Mama.
You wrote for me, your mother.
And he had them in his
He had them and saved every one.
Saved all.
And every one of them had a lot of, not a lot of money, but money.
Yeah.
Had money in it for the family.
Yeah.
And I noticed in that family too, they're the upper grade, we were the country folks, you know, we were the mountain folk. But he had blue eyes. You know what we attribute that to? The Crusades. Yes, he went to Lebanon. The Lebanese people got a pool of money together for him to go to Lebanon.
Right.
To see, we spent like so many immigrants. You see it today. They had planned to go back to Lebanon.
Right.
So they sent money buying up property in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we had quite a bit of property.
Right.
And so we didn't know what we had. So we sent. Of course, he wanted to go.
Right.
But I don't know. Did he go by himself? I thought he did. And when the people in the Lebanese community, Lebanon I'm speaking of, that's the southern part of Lebanon, realized what he was trying to do, he had to get the hell out of Lebanon. They went after him because they had confiscated the property.
Sure, they took it over from themselves.
They took it, is that right, Mary Louise? They took it over, and he was really like a mandate. You get out of here or we'll kill you. And it was common for all of us to have my father's first name as our middle name. In Lebanon, and you know, the Irish has it too, the O'Brien village and this. I mean, these are villages, so they couldn't distinguish it by the name of, say, this is Paul Rod, because there was so many Rod. They were there. If my father's name was Thomas, I am Paul, son of Thomas, Ibn, Paul Ibn Tanus. So we all have our father's first name as our middle name, and his father was named Joseph.
Right.
His father was named Joseph. So I am Paul, son of Thomas, the son of Joseph.
Wow.
So when we came through the pearly gates at Ellis Island and asked, what's your name? He would say, Paul, my father was Thomas, and his father was Joseph, so his was Thomas Joseph. I brought her over here since I met her in '75. I brought her over here at least 6 times. Now, I've learned more about Lebanon and the Lebanese people. And again, you're supposed to be proud of your people, but when you're raised back in when my original parents came over, and knew the attitude of the people towards them, we've come a long way. I am really so proud of America. It's the land of the immigrants. They had to get up and go, and life can better than what I've got. And if it's not here, I'm going to go find it. That is what's make America great.